If I'm going to market the entire organization, I'm going to have to be able to simplify my message in order to paint a broad picture of the few things that we do. Well, if you see where our company overlaps with our customer, this area that you see with the plus, that's a win for us. We're doing this for our customer, and our competition is not doing any of this. So with each of those audiences, there's a different view of marketing because based on who the audience is and what you're trying to accomplish.
Welcome back to Nonprofit Docs. I'm Dr. Marc Hardy, your host, and we are with Roger Cabe, a marketing expert and a colleague of mine for many years. We taught at Notre Dame together in the Nonprofit Certificate Education Program. And we are now moving into part two. We've already done part one, moving into part two of marketing for nonprofits. And the first question is, what are the key components of all marketing strategies, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit?
That's a great question. In fact, on our last session, we touched on it. One of the key components is your audience. Knowing your audience, knowing about your audience. How well do you know your audience? And a lot of times we think we only have one audience as a nonprofit, but there are multiple audiences that we could talk about here, and being as specific as possible to the audience you're trying to reach is what's very, very important. But that's only one part. I like to call these things your audience. I like to call them your assets. And then I say your adversary. And you're kind of going, okay, what does all that mean? So let's just talk about your nonprofit for a second. Let's start with the organization. Before we talk about the audience, what is the organization? Well, I work for an international eye company that does cataract surgeries in remote parts of the world for those that can't afford. They have low to no care. So we try to get into those areas and help restore the sight of preventable blindness for people. And some of these people have been blind for 4 or 5 or 6 years. Now, that's basically the outline of what we do. We do a lot more than that. But now, how am I going to market my organization? Well, if I'm going to market the entire organization, the asset, that's the organization itself. If I'm going to market the entire organization, I'm going to have to be able to simplify my message in order to paint a broad picture of the few things that we do, where we do a lot of things, but we do things in 3 major areas. So we learned that what we should say is, I call it our mountain of work, MTN, kind of short for mountain. We do what we call mission trips, or surgical endeavors that we take to a foreign country. That's a big part of what we do. We not only take those and plan those, but we also support other organizations that do that. So missions is the M. T is training. The doctors that we take on these trips, we go into bush areas, and the surgery they do here in the United States is different than what they would do in the bush area, because we may not have electricity. So they've got to learn how to do a manual surgery and not this high sophisticated digital surgery, and yet still get the same results. So that's the type of training we do. And not only do we train doctors in how to do this surgery, but we train people to assist the doctors, to be scrub nurses, to circulate, to sterilize instruments, to do some testing on the eye before we get there. We try to take skilled people that have these skills, and sometimes it's wonderful because we have a lot of skilled people, and sometimes we don't have as many, but we have to do some on-site training. So missions, training, and then the end would be networking. When people ask us, what do? We do missions, we do training, and we do networking. Now, I can take that and market that because I'm talking about 3 broad categories of assets. So these are the 3 categories we talked about. Your assets, that's your company. Your audience, that's your customer. And your adversary, that's your competition. Who else is serving in this space, or what is competing for the dollars that you need, or the time and the volunteers that you need? So when you look at your assets, here's a cake. This is kind of symbolizing your nonprofit. That's the whole thing. That's it as a whole. But you and I know that that cake is not just a cake. It's made up of a lot of parts. And so what's all in that cake? Well, here's the recipe. So Now, if you're looking at your assets, every one of these things that go into the cake is an asset. Just like our nonprofit, microscopes and equipment is an asset. Volunteers is an asset. Cataract surgery is an asset. Training is an asset. So we've got to look at our assets and decide what specific thing about our organization are we trying to market? Are we trying to market the entire thing or just a service that we do or just a product that we have? And so that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about assets. And we have this little thing called a pinhole includer, which I like to use this sometimes. It's interesting. People that need glasses can take off their glasses and hold up this pinhole includer and read a book or read a sign across the room without being refracted, without having their glasses on. Why is that? Why do you think they can do that through this pinhole includer?
I have astigmatism, so I know that this works, but this works for people who don't have astigmatism. Why does this work?
Well, it's interesting because you think they look through a bunch of holes at one time, but they don't. What they wind up doing is looking through one hole. So we say when you look through one hole and you're focusing on one thing, it eliminates the non-parallel rays. Now, that will be a marketing strategy when you go, if we're marketing this one thing and all these other things come in, they don't line up with what we're trying to market. So we need to set those aside until we get this asset or this piece of our organization marketed, the product or the service. Let's do that one first, and we'll come back and do these others later. So we have to focus on one thing. And so when you look at this thing as three different circles, what do you have is you have your company. So our company is Vision Outreach International. There's competitions, there's other nonprofits that do similar work, and then there's customers. So what happens is you bring these three circles together like so, and you start looking at, okay, how do they overlap? So here's something interesting. I'll make them bigger and I'll put the things up so you know that the red circle is your company, the green circle is your customer, and the blue circle is your competition. Or if you want to go back and you say assets, audience, and adversary, you can use those terms too. So how does this work when you're looking at it? Well, if you see where our company overlaps with our customer, this area that you see with the plus, that's a win for us. We're doing this for our customer, and our competition is not doing any of this. It's in this circle, this little area. So every time we're working in this area, then our customers will look to us for these particular services or these particular products. But then there's an area that they overlap with the customers that we don't. This is what they are doing. Our competition is doing for our customers that we're not doing. It could be that they're calling them up after they get some type of donation and maybe we don't. Or it could be that they are offering to supplement their medical trips and we don't. Whatever it is, the other company is winning here. And then in the middle are things that we both offer. So your customer is going to gravitate to the organization that has the type of assets that they're looking for. Our company has all kinds of things out here, and so does the other company. And this area right here is what we both have that the customer's not interested in. They're not interested. We both do this, We can help you with your taxes. Well, no, they're looking for a medical company that will do cataract surgery. And they're not interested in us doing taxes for them or whatever. And then there's a big area over here, a lot of other assets we have, customers not interested. So you can talk about these areas as long as you want to. And what they will hear is what I call Charlie Brown's mother every time you're talking to them is wah, 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 wah. You don't want to go there for a long time. And then over here are things that your competition or your adversary is doing to win the audience that you're working for, but they don't care about that stuff either. But then there's an important area that most organizations overlook. There's what we call white space. And in this white space is all the other things that the customer is wanting that nobody is offering. It could be convenience that we talked about in our last session. It could be, or maybe we talked about it in this session, convenience. It could be credibility. And the more you can take up of this white space, the more your circle moves into the customer's field and you gain more of their attention and more of their support. So kind of just going back, this is a plus for us. This is where we're both equal. This is where your competition's winning. And this is that white space, that space to where one of the two groups, either our company or our competition or adversary, can move into the space. So look what happens if your adversary moves into more of the white space. How much space do we have of the customer's time that our competition doesn't have?
Right.
It's that itty bitty little space up top, you know? And so if it's the other way around and we move into that white space, look at how much space we've got of the customer's time, our energies, our attention, and our competition only has that little bitty space at the bottom. And then if we both move into it to equal degrees, it's kind of everything starts overlapping. So they could go either way. And there are some organizations that are so similar to us, it's kind of like, we can't accommodate them, can you? Or they'll say, we can't accommodate them, can you? And so you begin partnering with those organizations and working through the assets and the audience and the adversary and kind of working together on that.
It's nice when nonprofits can work together and collaborate, isn't it?
Very much so.
You're right. Yeah. That's a really good explanation in the nonprofit sector. In your experience, when we talk about customers, what does that mean? What are our particular customers?
Our customers or our audience, well, I can look at it from my nonprofit. Number one, I have an audience of volunteers, doctors, volunteer surgeons, volunteer staff, volunteer general helpers to go on a team. That's one audience. And then I have my board, which is an audience. If we want to get something done, a lot of times we have to get approval before we can get it done. So now I have to explain and interpret and help my board get on board with us as to where we're going and what we're doing. And then there's my donors. That's an audience in and of itself. Some of the donors are people that will go on trips, and others are just friends of those that go on trip that will support those people. And then there are actually our patients. That's another audience. So, our patients, letting them know we have credibility. And then there's an audience of foreign country dignitaries and partners on the ground, and we have to communicate to them. And then there's a whole government, because when we go into certain countries, we need a letter of invitation from the Ministry of Health and government representatives. And somehow we have to help them understand what we're trying to do is come in and help your people. And we're not trying to come in and make a bunch of money. We just really want to come in and serve and help your people regain their sight. So with each of those audiences, there's a different view of marketing, because based on who the audience is and what you're trying to accomplish. And even when you get into your whole donor sect, you've got those young people and small donors that may give through social media, but then some of the older people and the big dollars, they may think, okay, I want to have a conversation. And then there's others, just send me a letter in the mail. And knowing what type of donors you have will help you market to them more effectively.
And that brings me to this question. When you say marketing, that means a lot of different things, right? It could be print marketing, it could be letters, it could be cards, it can be videos, it could be YouTube, it could be whatever. In your experience, given today's framework and what's happening, because things change so fast, what has been your experience with the best ways to market? And I know it depends on the audience. You probably have to use different tools, but do you have 2 or 3 or 4 different ways you market?
Well, yeah, that changes, and it doesn't just change based on the audience. It changes based on years, because years ago, you and I know that some people may not understand video being A/B roll, which when I came along in video, you had 2 machines and then you cut between. Yeah, exactly. You cut between. And now you have this digital. So things change. And so your marketing strategy change. You've got to be fluid. You got to be willing to change. If you're not willing to change, then forget marketing, because you'll eventually, it'll grow old and people will just go away from you. So I market?
You're telling me you're not using VHS tapes anymore?
No, 8 tracks, reel to reel VHS. I kind of set them aside and started using the internet and all that type of stuff. No, it's interesting, because I guess it's according on your market and finding out where your market is. We used to say that Facebook was, the cutting edge thing. And now my grandkid says that's for a bunch of old people, and I'm still thinking.
I've been told that too.
I've been thinking, well, Facebook is I thought that was the cutting edge, but now they're on TikTok, and now they're on all kind of other stuff.
Instagram and
Instagram, TikTok, you got it,
and
LinkedIn, whatever.
YouTube is like one of the
big.
biggest audiences now. Billions of people are watching that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. What we've realized is our larger dollars come in through the mail, and they don't necessarily come in through the mail, but they're generated through what we call snail mail. They come through face-to-face and interactions with people. Those are our larger dollars. For an individual who is going on a trip, they may not have time to get face-to-face with some of the people. We have a digital portal through our online giving system that they can write what their story is and why they want to be a part of this, and then send that link to their audience. And they have to decide, are they more connected via email or more connected through texting? So we give them a way that they can text to give. Like if you want to support me, you can put Roger, just 44321 in your text message, and then put the word Roger, and it comes up, and then it goes straight to my portal, and you could support me. So we try to help them in different ways. We find out where they're involved. Are you involved in your community? Is your family super supportive? Okay, let's go, the people you can go after the quickest. Let me show you another PowerPoint that's kind of interesting that kind of gets right into this. How do you connect with your audience? Well, here's a question. How do you get others to know you and like you? So you got to decide who your audience is. And once you decide who it is and where it is, whether it's digital, whether it's Facebook, whether it's social media, whether it's email, whether it's texting, whether it's in the community at your church or at a civic organization, could be a sporting event, could be at your school, could be a number of different places. But the question is the same. How do you get people to know you and to like you? Well, this comes out of a book called The Like Switch by Jack Schaefer. Great little book. Now, this is not necessarily a marketing book in the sense of what you'd read as a company, but it's talking to individuals about how do you get people to know you and like you. But I thought, hey, this is great stuff. I can use it, understanding how to market. He was a former interrogator, and I'll just give you a little bit of his story, which I think is kind of interesting.
We'll put a link to his book here, down below.
So Jack was given the responsibility of interrogating some terrorists. And so he was trying to figure out how he was going to do this. And this is how he used these principles to interrogate this guy. He went to the jail, and the terrorist knew that he was there to interrogate him. Jack says, I want to talk to you. And the guy says, I don't want to talk to you. He says, I know why you're here. I don't want to tell you anything. Jack says, okay. So he left. And then the next day, Jack came back to the prison. The guy came into the room with him. Jack had a paper with him. And he sat down across the table from this guy, and he opened up his paper and started reading. And he read. For 30 minutes, he sat there and read. Then he closed up his paper, and he walked out of the room. Day 2, he came back in with his paper. He sits across from the guy. He opens up his paper. He starts reading it. 30 minutes. Closes his paper, walks out of the room. He did this day after day after day for 2 weeks. And finally, this guy across from the table one day says, why do you keep coming in here and reading your paper? And Jack just took his paper and kind of folded it down and looked at him and says, because I want to talk to you. And then he lifted his paper back up and started reading again. Finished up, closed up his paper, and walked out. The next day, he came back in the same way. Within a few days, the guy says, okay, I'll talk to you. But I'm not going to talk about any of the criminal stuff I've done. And Jack puts his paper down. He says, okay, what do you want to talk about? He says, let's talk about sports. So they talked about sports. He left, came back the next day, talked about sports. Then they wound up moving into family. Within 2 months, the guy told him everything he wanted to know. So these are the principles that I want to show you that come out of his book. And I love these things. I think they can be used on all kinds of relationships plus nonprofits. So how do you get people to like you? Here's the first thing, and we forget this sometimes. Proximity. You have to be present. You have to be around these people. You have to be in their space. And so if there's some donor that you're trying to influence, or if there's some other organization that you're trying to influence, you find out what spaces do they occupy? Where are they? And then you go to their spaces. It could be that they frequent a coffee shop every few days, So you start showing up at that coffee shop, and they may not say anything to you, but I guarantee you after a while they recognize you're here every time I'm here. So in that sense, there's a little bit of like that they're bringing your way. Oh, we have something in common. We like the same coffee shop. So I don't know how long it's going to take, but just get in, just go where they are, go into their spaces, find out, where they spend time, those organizations, what they're involved in. And then the second principle is this: how often are you there? How often do they see you? If you take the coffee shop example, if you frequent the same coffee shop, after a while, one day you're going to catch each other's eyes and you're going to kind of go, hello. They're going to say hello or good morning or, and that may be all it is. But the more often you're there, the more often you'll say, hello, how are you? Oh, now the conversation's getting longer. It's not just hello anymore. It's how are you? And then you start talking about the weather or whatever you're talking about. So it's proximity, and then it's frequency. And then over time, it's duration. Okay, the first time you said something, it was hello. The next day it was hello, how are you? A week later is, hey, how are you? Good seeing you this morning. The next thing you know, you're talking about the weather. And then you talk about, do you come here often? And then what do you do for work? And so you have this duration that you have. It may be 3 minutes one time, 5 minutes one time, 15 minutes one time. But the goal is to increase that duration at least bigger than just a 30-second recognition. And then the last thing is, now some people never get to this, but if you're good at proximity, frequency, and duration before long, it's not just intensity, but it's depth. I think I put intensity here, but I think the word really is depth. How deep can you go with this individual? What are you talking about? Oh, I'm in nonprofit work. You're in nonprofit work? Yeah, I work in eyes too. Amazing. And then the next thing you know, you're having these conversations and you're beginning to partner with one another and work together. This works in nonprofits. And it starts with the simple thing of just finding out where they're at and getting in the same space.
Yeah. When I speak or teach or consult and I talk about conflict or whatever, I talk about establishing commonality, the importance of that. And it sounds to me like this is what this process does, is it establishes what is common between people and it builds bridges. So even if you have disagreements, the things you have in common are stronger than your disagreements, and you can have deeper, more intense conversations about things that eventually end up actually mattering, right?
That's correct. Sometimes we think about, well, I don't like this about that person. But if we get honest, there's things about me I don't like. So it's not our differences that matter. It's our commonalities and what can we do together and, continue to move forward with a similar heart.
That's great. I love that. So we've covered how to build strong relationships and these keys to likability. Is there anything else you want to add to this before we go on to part 3?
Well, there's one statement that I thought was a key statement in all of this. And what's the key to making someone like you? What do other people want to talk about the most? You have a guess there, but what do you think other people want to talk about? If you're talking with somebody else, if I'm talking with you, what's the easiest thing for you to talk about?
Well, yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
So if I really want you to like me, I say something nice about you. Mark, I appreciate this work that you're doing for nonprofits. I appreciate the teaching you're doing and all this free stuff you're putting out there. It's a wonderful thing, man. Keep up the good work.
I'm a member of the National Speakers Association, and there are people there that their expertise is actually working a room, especially if you're an introvert. And one of the things they said is, look, you don't have to do the conversation. You can just ask the question and the conversation will come to you. And one of the tricks that they showed, I guess I shouldn't call it a trick, but it's a technique, is, for instance, if they say, if I'm talking to you and you say, yeah, I help people get new eyesight by giving them, we give them cataract surgery for free. And all you have to do is repeat the last 2 words and say for free. And then pretty soon, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. And then you repeat the last 2 or 3 words of their next sentence, and they will tell you all kinds of things. And now you have established not only a relationship, but your knowledge base is much bigger, right? So it seems to me that would be part of this, right?
It is. And that's what they call in the negotiation industry mirroring, to where you're just
Yeah.
mirroring what somebody else says. When they say something, you take a couple of words that sound important and just repeat it back in a kind of a question form, and they tell you more, and you say it back, and you tell you more. And before long, they think you're the nicest person in the world, and you've never said anything except what they said.
Yeah, and it really works if you're an introvert because it
Yep.
takes all the pressure off you of making small talk, right? And you can
Absolutely.
get pretty deep when you're asking questions like
Yeah,
that. Well,
absolutely.
great. Well, thank you. We're going to wrap up part 2 here. We've had a lot of great information. And if you have listened to this and you haven't listened to part 1, you can go here to listen to part 1, or we're going to go to part 3, which is here. So we'll see you on the other side.